Hi everyone, it's Sketcher Fashion Drawing Tutorials, and in this lesson we're going to render this beautiful dress worn by Chiara Ferragni in Rome for Fendi Fall Winter 2019-2020. So I uploaded the pose scheme and like how the clothing are laying on the body, so we'll start from rendering. So I'm using peach color as the base. Actually, you can just color the whole upper part with the marker. So peach is basically something between orange and pink, and it's quite light. In case you're using different markers or have different colors. So next I'm using coral. Coral is close to peach, but it's darker. And I'm applying it with these dots. So very similar to just the way that we render sequins. I'm actually going to upload tutorials like this. I'm not going to show the way that I'm drawing the body and everything. I will upload the draft and the way that I used to do it in the beginning of Sketcher, because otherwise this is it will take forever to create these tutorials. And it's really hard because when I draw faces, for example, I bend over the drawing and in unhealthy position, but you know, I cannot do it with a camera. It's a bit those faces I really take care about drawing them, putting my soul into it, so it's I need some special environment for that. So as you can see, I left some highlights. And those highlights, they stretch to her breasts. Why? Because that's the tension points. So we have like two breasts, and all these highlights are stretching toward the breast. So next I'm using burnt orange, which is dark orange. You can use terracotta if you don't have burnt orange or anything similar. And I'm working inside of those darker coral parts. So whenever you add a darker color, you add it inside of previous dark tone, because we're showing deeper shadows. And again, here the breast area is the lightest. We have like usually along the outline we have some shadows. You can see like the sides of the top colored with burnt orange. Now I'm using walnut, which is even darker than burnt orange. It's like a bit reddish brown. And again, I'm coloring there where we have shadows. And you can add peach PROMARKER, so everything blends a little bit together. Since we don't have sequins, I think I already forgot the texture, but it was something really smooth. And now I'm using warm gray 5, which is even darker than walnut. So usually for PROMARKERs, at least number 5 is the darkest. Like you have warm gray 1, warm gray 2, warm gray 3, and 5 is the darkest. And I'm working with the other side. Again, I'm working with the coral. I want just to add more of it. And since this side dried, when you add the same color on the top of it, like coral on the top of coral, it looks darker. It's the quality of marker. So here we're working the same way, just don't make symmetrical folds. Make two sides a bit different. And again, the breast part is lit. Warm gray 5. If you don't have some colors, you can skip them or try to use other ones and just take a look if it works. Because usually when I draw, it's not like you have to do it this way. It's just I feel like since this fabric is shiny, it reflects everything around, so you can use some extra colors. Now I'm using plastic plate and I put it below the sketch. And now with burgundy pencil, I'm just coloring on the top and I get these little squares. Also locate the plate so these squares are not, they are like not perpendicular, so they are at the angle. You just turn the plate. This is also not like must-have step, but sometimes I like using different textures, putting them underneath. And when I first saw this dress of Chiara Ferragni, like a Fendi dress, I thought that I will use the plate because it has some tiny squares. Now making the shadows darker with black pencil. All these super shiny textures like PVC, patent leather, they like wine, yeah, they all have high contrast, so we use black usually with those ones. Now let's refine everything. You can use this burgundy pencil, a bit more of the black, and some wrinkles. Now I'm using white ink gel pen. I used Sakura one, and now I'm using 0.8 size. It's not very thick, but at the same time not too fine. Just if you have several ones, check, compare with my lines. I want to have these also white dots, more or less in like yeah, nothing. So I'm trying to touch very softly because I don't want to get really thick dots. It's not, otherwise it will look like some polka dots. Next, I'm using a correction pen, just normal office correction pen, stationery, and I'm showing that super strong light that is concentrated at the breast line. And a little bit below, on the top of that huge wrinkle. And here also on the top of that wrinkle. Those are like mountains. And between them, the falls are valleys that have no light. Next, I'm using peach. And make sure that all that pen and correction pen also is dry, so you don't smudge anything. And I apply peach on the top of that correction pen, very softly, very gently. And yeah, don't push too hard not to crack it. And a little bit here and there. So the strongest light is in the center, I keep it white. And other ones colored and now I'm making some diagonal strokes with black pencil and opposite direction. Alright, I like how it turned out. Let's show the texture with the outline. I'm not outlining everything, just want to show that it's not smooth, the surface. And here we have some highlights too on the sides. I'm showing them with white pen. Just a little bit of pencil to blend the edges. Alright, so now let's work with her purse. A small bag, and it's silver. It's also Fendi. We'll have the fastening with double F. And with Ice Gray 4, I'm showing the actually leaving the highlight and coloring the rest. So for latest tutorials, I tried to not to outline everything, but with outlining it's really easier to draw because you have kind of border that you fill in. A bit more of Ice Gray 4 for higher contrast. And now you're going to scribble like that in just, you know, like many columns of that scribbling. So if you're just drawing, you can start with outlining and then stop it once you're confident with marker, because otherwise it can bleed and for all those, like usually for the hands, I take a selfie. I hold something, take a selfie, and then draw my own hand. So now Chiara Ferragni has my hand. With white ink gel pen, I'm adding some highlights with dots. You can just actually, instead of dots, make tiny strokes because, again, it's not the sequence. More of the gray. Highlights. And I'm using you can use mustard, gold, any darker yellow, and then play with black and white. So for the gold, we just need a little bit of yellow. And then we sometimes use brown pencil or black pencil. In this case, you can use just fine line pen, outline maybe one side of the letters, because the dimension is small for the pencil. So this was a request of my patron, Andrea. Thank you very much for your suggestion. So if you have something that you want us to draw, you can send to me. We can maybe put it into the list and draw it, because there are so many things that we can draw. Why not to draw what you want to be able to draw, right? So for the golden watch, I'm just again using yellow, black fine liner, a little bit of brown pencil. You don't need to draw the whole details, just the impression of it. So for example, this black bracelet has, I think it has Jadior text, but we will not write Jadior because from that huge distance you cannot see the whole details. So we'll just scribble something there with white ink, gel pen. So make lines and just some drawing some random things. A bit of brown pencil to show the shadows. I'm adding a bit a dusky pink for the contrast on her hands, and using purple pencil to show more details, like the outline of this hand. Otherwise it looks a bit too foggy. Black pencil, shadows, and she has some tattoo. Again, I'm drawing just something random. I even cannot see what's that on the photo. I'm using sandstone, and let's work on the bigger part of her skirt. So with the sandstone, I'm making the strokes, and usually when I have these huge folds, I start from the sides of the folds and then make these super dynamic fast strokes up. And I color more this area between the folds because there we have less of light. So there you can apply whatever marker you use, like in a bigger quantity. And yeah. So as you can see, I color less the center of the folds because it is like more prominent and it gets all that light. I'm using caramel PROMARKER right now. It's a bit dry, and I try to keep some markers that are still alive but drying because they give this special strokes. So more of the sandstone is going to be our base color. Okay. So now I'm playing with caramel and sandstone. When it's darker, and obviously caramel, it is caramel. When it's lighter, it is sandstone. Once you are like more confident with using markers, and it comes when you draw more, you will be okay mixing especially similar colors. It's fun actually, so give it a try. Maybe you'll do it all the time. Like if you look at the skirt and you're not sure this marker or this one, just use both of them. Okay. And yeah, darkening this area between the folds. To lift a little bit that side. And this dry marker effect is really good for organza or chiffon sometimes. Anything that is a little bit something that is translucent but not very soft. Maybe more for organza. Yeah. A bit caramel. And yeah, here be careful because we have some details. We need to work fast so our strokes don't tell that we left that part and colored separately. So with warm gray 3, I'm going to add like one more layer of a darker tone, and you can add even warm gray 5 while warm gray 3 is still wet, so it blends. Otherwise it will be just, you know, like obvious dark spot. So warm gray 3, because in order to add all those white net with flowers, we need a really dark background. Otherwise, it won't be that visible and won't look effectively. So I'm adding warm gray 3 in the same way I've been adding the previous colors. Like I start from the sides of the folds, so, and then go further if I need to. And sometimes I add warm gray 5, which is obvious, like darker gray. Let's just define the arm so we don't lose it. Gold. Here is just, you make the area between the folds darker, the center of the fold is lighter, but try to be more artistic. Try to play with the way that you apply strokes. Make wider and thinner strokes. Use dry markers, use normal markers, mix the colors. So it will look more interesting than, you know, just building a perfect gradient when your center of the fold is super lit and the sides are almost symmetric. So black pencil is next step for separating the folds if you need to, and then darken certain area. And yeah, make sure that everything is connected. So if you have fold like above the back, it should go on like below the back in the same direction. You need like consistency. Okay, final steps with warm gray 5. I'm becoming super brave, adding really dark, the darkest for the skirt. And warm gray 3 just to blend a little bit. And I also decided to add cinnamon. You can skip it. I just want to give something a little bit reddish to this skirt. And cinnamon is close to caramel, you know, it's just... I told you I'm like recently mixing all the colors. So next, take white ink gel pen. Again, I'm using 08 Sakura one, and let's draw this diagonal lines. And I'm trying to, for every fold or every like area, I'm trying to make these diagonal lines a little bit different. So I'm drawing them separately. I'm not drawing huge diagonal lines all over the skirt, because they will look differently on each fold. Here I actually missed this inner part, but okay, let's show it at least at the bottom. So here, for example, I change very slightly the slope and everything. Like, look at how like mild is the difference. Don't make it like one lines are flat, others are at the huge angle. Also pay attention to the distance between the lines. You can work faster, you don't have to make super perfect lines, but try to have more or less the same distance between the lines. And if they're a little bit curvy, a little bit wavy, a little bit, then they will look more naturally and better than just super perfect curves. And then draw lines in opposite directions, so you get this kind of diamonds, and we get like fishnet. And now with the same pen and paint, I'm drawing flowers at each intersection. So it's not like perfect flowers, just small spots. And like, yeah, just you can watch in full screen mode. And once you're done, you use warm gray 3, and I add some shadows inside of each diamond, like let's say upper corner. So below that upper corner of the diamond, I add just spot. It gives the dimension. It shows that these flowers are actually prominent. They are not print on the skirt. So that's why we need a little bit of shadows inside. I'm doing that everywhere. And with the same gray, I'm adding shadows. Be very careful when applying. Don't push too hard, because we have a pen that can smudge. I'm using pink carnation. I'm going to use two pinks. One is lighter and the other one is darker. So pink carnation is the darker pink. I'm applying it. You can apply it even as a dot in the center of each flower. It's everywhere. And then I'm using cocktail pink, which is lighter one, to add several, like, to give several touches to each flower. So it's so each flower will get this extra pink, but I'm not coloring it 100%. Maybe a little bit of white will still be left there. So, okay. Now take white ink gel pen And on the edges of the fold, just add some, you know, like random shapes, because it shows that their fabric is bent, and we see several flowers like together, because we're looking at them, at the pattern from the sides. I hope you can feel what I mean. So because the fabric is bent, how to explain it, like this kind of side view of the pattern. I think I'm just repeating myself. So that's why on the edge of every fold, just add some this like texture, let's say. And now we're working with her hair. I'm using Primrose, and here I applied a little bit of lime yellow, but I think it's too yellow, so let's just keep using Primrose, which is super light yellow. If you use different markers, then you can pick the lightest yellow that you have. And yeah, let's try to draw this locks of hair very softly, really like make it more fluid, not like plastic shapes. So I'm leaving at certain parts highlights, like in the middle of the locks, and on the top you can see. Next, just let's add a little bit maybe of some sun-kissed or a bit orangey. But actually here I don't like how it looks, so let's stop it. You can add maybe something later. So I'm using Warm Gray 3. Oh, I'm using, yeah, Warm Gray 3. And on the other side too. So usually with warmer colors we use warm grays, like with yellow, and with like blue colors we might use cool or even ice gray, like when we add shadows. Like with black pencil, I'm showing the, like adding some strokes, and I move from the roots of your hair to the highlights, like the pencil strokes, not vice versa. Let's cover this yellow part a bit with white ink gel pen and add some strokes with just mechanical pencil. Again, gray. A bit of sun-kissed, which is between coral and tan, I would say. I show some strokes, but not too many. I rather separate the locks than show actually hair, like each piece. So next I'm using brown, a bit like brick color of brown pencil. And you usually add the strokes at the beginning of the lock and at the end of the lock, and then you keep the highlighted area without any strokes. So as you can see, I have like 4 or 5 like pieces of hair that have the same direction on the left side, and maybe 3, 4 also on the other side. And your locks, they should be close to each other and have similar directions. Like sometimes you can add certain elements, tiny locks that have different direction, but don't get all crazy about, you know, having locks, one like super curved to the left and other to the right. It will look too messy. And when you work with black one, also be very careful. Add it only in super dark parts. And here on the sides, everywhere, just touch very softly. And in order to build the transition, I'm using brown pencil, and from the black, I just add some strokes. And that's it. It's better to be very light. Light brown pencil, then black pencil. Bit of warm gray 2. Some black. So usually we have the strokes in the beginning of the hair piece and at the end. And in the center we have these highlights, and we make strokes towards the highlights. So here as well, a small lock. Keep everything light. Don't draw too many locks of hair. They all have more or less same direction. And just some details. Okay, so let's add some shadows on your legs. And here it's important, when something prevents light from the top, we add the shadows. For example, here we have a skirt. So let's add shadows like this, and then use just skin tone to build a more smooth transition. So for our flowers, I made these strokes with fine line pen just to define the shape, and let's finish everything. So I'm using warm gray 3. I left some highlights, and with warm gray 1, just coloring the rest, tiny triangles. And then erase everything, finish the details. If you need an outline, you can use just a pencil, or if you want a strong outline, you can use a fine line pen. Okay. Just smaller details. Soles and shadows with a black pencil. So we're done with this tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you found something new for yourself. Share your questions and suggestions, and see you in next tutorial.